We have come to the conclusion that many of these violations constitute crimes against humanity. In previous reports, we had already documented how the government of Venezuela used systematic repression to remain in power.
Systematic, coordinated, and deliberate repression by the Venezuelan government. We are facing a systematic, coordinated, and deliberate repression by the Venezuelan government, which responds to a conscious plan to silence any form of dissent. As part of this plan, the government has instrumentalized the entire state apparatus, including especially the justice system, with a view to silencing any type of difference of opinion that opposes its scheme and to staying in power at any price.
The figures we have presented reveal the extent of violations committed. We cannot ignore that these violations represent a clear and deliberate line of conduct by the authorities of politically motivated persecution. We have come to the conclusion that many of these violations constitute crimes against humanity. In previous reports, we had already documented how the government of Venezuela used systematic repression to remain in power. Today, in this report, we confirm that this repression has reached an unprecedented level. President Maduro himself announced on 6th of August exactly 2,229 arrests since 29 July. This was the result of the so-called Operación Tuntún, which was announced in a mix of a mocking and threatening tone. Following this presidential order, without any attachment to legality or respect for the rule of law, we documented more than 40 cases in which the security forces entered private homes without warrants, just using social media videos as the only evidence to arrest people who they thought had participated in protests or who had expressed criticism in social media. In several cases, the houses in popular neighborhoods of people who participated in protest or expressed criticism were even marked with an X. As Patricia mentioned before, we have documented that in several cases, the detained people were subject to acts of torture and ill treatment, as well as sexual violence. President Maduro even suggested that all people should be sent to labor camps to be re-educated. According to our investigations, all these arrests involved and were followed by serious violations of due process, reaching unprecedented levels in the country. The criminal proceedings initiated against detainees systematically failed to comply with the minimum guarantees of due process. The Attorney General announced before the people were arrested that they would be charged with crimes as serious as terrorism and incitement to hatred, even against children with disabilities, as Marta mentioned. We have ratified our previous conclusion that the justice system, especially the criminal system, led by the Supreme Court, its criminal appeal chamber, and its 4 terrorism courts, is manifestly subordinated to the interests of the executive power and has become a key instrument in the state's plan to repress all kinds of political and social dissent. These courts are monopolizing the proceedings against detainees after the elections, who are not allowed to have lawyers of their choice and tried in collective judicial proceedings without individualizing charges against them, which take place at night in detention centers, without effective public defenders, without publicity, and without being able to participate in the proceedings. Victims and a large part of general population are exposed to an arbitrary exercise of power, where arbitrary detention is systematically used together with serious violations of due process. We have previously warned that the government could activate the repressive apparatus at will, and indeed, that is what we are observing. Repression and human rights violations are widespread and systematic, and we must act urgently to protect victims and ensure that those responsible are held into account.